Okay, simula na napanood ko yung first episode ng Mighty Morphin Power Rangers sa isa sa mga pinakasikat na pizza joint dun sa malaking projector screen nila, I never looked back. Wala na akong pakialam kung gusto mo nila manood ng PBA nung panahon na yun. Basta ang alam ko lang, nakita ko yung giant Megazords up on screen and I was blown away. And I still am 20 plus years later, 25 plus years later. This is X Paco from Ranger Wiki. And this is the history of Power Rangers. So, bago nagkaroon ng Power Rangers, isa sa mga pinakaunang superhero franchises in Japan na pinanggalingan nito ay ang Kamen Rider sa toy. Mag-isang superhero lang siya, pero ang idea noon is that nagtatransform siya from human to superhero. So, henshin, di ba? Ganun yung style niya. Ginawa ito ni Shotaro Ishinomori, pero at the same time, they wanted to sell more toys. More pa. So, naisip nila, bakit hindi tayo gumawa ng isang step ng Kamen Riders? Pero hindi na siya naging Kamen Riders. Ginawa nila tong Super Sentai. Sentai meaning team or task force. And in another part of history, nagkaroon din ng Spider-Man TV show sa Japan. Now, yung Spider-Man TV show na yon, para hindi lang mabenta si Spider-Man, kasi syempre Spider-Man lang yan eh. Bigyan natin ng something else. So, ang ginawa nila, para maging unique at bumenta sa mga bata, binigyan nila ng giant robot, ang pangalan Leopardon. Ang galing. Medyo kakaiba siya.
Leopardon! Sodo Bika!
Pero yung unang-unang Super Sentai ay tinatawag na Go Rangers. In fact, pinalabas na to in the Philippines as Star Rangers. Pero sobrang dati pa. Wala siyang kaakibat na toys, wala siyang kaakibat na merchandise. Pinalabas na siya sa TV, yun na yun. Hindi siya ganun ka-big deal at the time. Pero, of course, it now stands as the first ever Super Sentai series in history. Tapos sometime later, ang Marvel, Marvel, Spider-Man, X-Men, Wolverine, Avengers, gumawa sila ng co-production with Toei at ginawa nila ang Battle Fever J. Battle Fever J are international superheroes, pero technically Super Sentai sila. So, multicolored din sila. Very interesting. And this will come into play later. Now, ano bang meron dun sa mga sa Giant Robos na yan? But the Giant Robo phenomenon kasi, it's basically taking what's robots and making them animals or large vehicles that combine into one humanoid robot. Of course, hindi siya agad nag-start from there. Hindi naman, agad-agad na yun na yung may sarili siyang history. Hindi siya like nag-start sila with giant robots tapos yun na yun until now. Pero nagkaroon siya ng sarili niyang evolution, and basically it's fantastical animals or giant vehicles that combine into one big fighting machine. So ngayon, yung boss ni Stan Lee sa Marvel, kasi nga 'di ba na-try na ng Marvel yung mag-co-produce sa Japan ng Battle Fever J. Tinry nilang dalhin yung isa pang Super Sentai series which is called Sun Vulcan. Tinry nilang dalhin sa United States. Yung boss ni Stan Lee nun, Margaret Lesh, which is, the head of a lot of the cartoons, hindi mo alam na siya pala yung reason kung bakit nandyan yung mga cartoons and kids shows na yan. They really tried to push Sun Vulcan sana, pero hindi nag-succeed. Around the same time, yung Bandai sa Japan medyo nagsistruggle financially, so what they did, nag-expand sila to the United States. Bandai America at the time, isa sa mga biggest products nila, is chalk. As in chalk. Hindi ko alam kung paano nila nabibenta yon, pero sige, go. But eventually, yung Bandai Japan, ang ginawa nila is finanal nila yung mga robots galing sa Super Sentai, tapos dinala nila sa United States under the Godaikin line. So, ang problema lang is wala siyang story. Hindi siya kagaya ng Transformers na dinala galing sa Japan, pumunta sa United States, ginawa ng kwento and everything. Di ba nga tinatry ni Margaret Lesh and Stan Lee to make a TV show, sana. But the thing is, nobody wanted to get it. So, anong nangyari is, yung mga robots nandyan, and galing siya sa Japan, but nobody had a story for these robots kasi hindi naman pinalabas yung Super Sentai at the time. Eto na nga.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4,
In the Philippines, Bioman and the sequel, Bioman 2 sa atin, Masked Man were so big in the Philippines to the point na meron siyang movie. Meron siyang movie with Shider. Natatandaan niyo ba yan? Bioman, Masked Man, Shider. It was a 3-in-1 movie that was aired in theaters. Now, the TV shows were so big here in the Philippines, pero the toys were sobrang konti. Ang swerte man ako makakita ka ng mga 4-inch na Chogokin. By the way, Chogokin is die-cast. Meron tayong Chogokin figures na 4-inch para sa halos lahat ng Super Sentai, may ganon. And kung meron kang Bioman na ganon, swerte mo. Pero ang mga nakikita ko nun was, some kids had these mini Bio-Robos. Swerte mo talaga if you had them kasi hindi siya largely marketed here in the Philippines. Yung Masked Man naman, merong nauso na parang 10 or 11 inch na knockoff plastic na hindi siya ganun kagandahan. Pero Masked Man siya. Literally nakasupot lang siya. 11-inch figures na may removable helmets tapos may stickers na label. Hindi naman siya hinabol ng Bandai at the time because hindi naman, hindi pa kalakasan ng Bandai here in the Philippines. Now, one time, si Haim Saban, this guy who's in charge of a lot of the music for a lot of the TV shows na kilala natin like Rainbow Bright, He-Man, She-Ra, X-Men, he chose to bring the Super Sentai phenomenon to the United States. Kasi one time, parang nasa Japan siya, tapos nakita niya sa hotel, nanonood siya, tapos, ayan, Super Sentai. Na-intriga siya. Sabi niya, parang okay to parang I can bring this to the United States. Kunin ko lang yung mga na-produce na parts. Tapos, haluan ko ng American segments, yung mga human, civilian footage. Tapos, yung mga fights, yung mga mecha battles, ganon. Kukunin ko na lang from that footage. Let's see kung bebenta. Ang palabas nun ay Bioman. Tinry niya, even with Mark Dacascos, and the guy who played sa Street Fighter. Syempre, naalala ko pa talaga, no? But yeah, he tried to sell it to various TV networks for about a period of 8 years. Pero walang bumibili. Wala. Ayaw nila. Hindi nila feel. Until one day, kumatok si Saban kay Margaret Lesh. And Margaret Lesh is like, teka, alam ko to, tinry na namin to ibenta ni Stanley before hindi siya nag-succeed. Pero feel ko yung idea mo. So, sabi nila, okay, sige, pag-partneran natin. So, sabi ni Margaret Lesh, sige, bigyan kita ng 52 episodes. Sa mga nakakilala sa akin, alam nila, 52 is my magic number. So, while she had the option of buying it, nung dinala niya sa bosses niya, sabi nila parang, parang hindi to bebenta. Alam mo, delikado trabaho mo dito. Sabi niya, sige, try natin. Sige. Pero, syempre, kinakabahan na siya kasi baka nga hindi bumenta. I mean, imagine, ilang years na nila tinatry isal sa mga networks to, pero walang kumagat. Pero by the time that they could commit to making a show, Zyu Ranger na yung palabas. Which is swerte because dinosaurs were still a big thing in the United States. Hello, Jurassic Park! So finally, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was released in the United States.
After 10,000 years, I'm free! It's time to conquer Earth! Go, Power Rangers!
Critics hated it, but kids loved it. Loved it so much. So what happened was, Bandai Japan made the toys, and Toei already had the show. So, kinuha na lang nila yung mga action sequences and costume sequences. Dinala nila sa US, dinala yung molds ng toys sa US, and tada, okay na lahat. So, the toys were actually made in Japan led by Tsuyoshi Nonaka. So, Bandai America simply had to Americanize everything from each previous year. So, bale, kung ano yung palabas last year. So, last year, Zyu Ranger. Dinala nila sa US ngayon. And, they used the footage and most of the toy molds. Nung pinag-uusapan nila yung pangalan, they capitalized on the transforming aspect of the Transformers line. Kaya nila nakuha yung word na morph. So, kinuha nila yan. Morph. Tapos sabi nila, parang mabenta yung bam, 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 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, they were like, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So, ayan na. There you go. That's why we ended up with that very 90s fantastical name, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, pero of course, just because they brought the toys over from Japan, hindi siya literal na, 1:1 translation. Dala nila yung molds, pero kailangan pa rin nila sundin yung safety standards ng United States. So, like for example, yung Dragon Dagger ni Green Ranger, it had to be rubberized para mas safe. Eto nga, para bumenta yung show, ang ginawa ni Margaret Lesh, nakipag-deal siya sa mga network. Sabi niya, sige, ganito. Alam kong medyo iffy kayo ipalabas yung show. But what we're gonna do is, yung cut ng toy sales, pupunta sa inyo. May cut ng toy sales para sa inyo for as long as you air Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Eto na nga. Never pa to nangyari. This is the first time that any kind of deal like this was cut, but it was successful. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was the #1 show in America in Fox Kids. Kasama niya yung X-Men, and Batman the Animated Series. Etong mga shows na to were all also big hits here in the Philippines. Tatandaan nyo ba yun? So, pinag-aagawan siya sa United States to the point na nagtutulakan yung mga people sa toy aisle because, everybody wanted Power Rangers toys. Pero sa atin, medyo 1.5 years late tayo. So, I remember walking into toy aisles and thinking, sa Nova Fontana, tsaka sa Robinsons, sa Alabang, and sa mga gift gate, and thinking, ano ba to? Ano ba tong Power Rangers na to? Parang cartoon ba to? What? Tapos, I didn't know what it was. Wala pa tayong internet back then, remember? And nakakatawa, dahil nga late tayo ng 1.5 years, yung Wave 1 and 2 sa United States, isang bagsakan dito binagsak. So, what did we have? We had Automorphin figures. We had 8-inch deluxe figures na sobrang articulated. We had 2.5-inch collectible figures, role-play items, 8-inch and 5-inch villain action figures, Megazords, Ultrazords, Blade Blasters, Morphers, at kung ano pa. There were even dolls. And what was fun is, in the Philippines, we even had stuff, also in other parts of Asia, we had stuff they didn't have in the US. So we had the 4-inch toys, nakagaya nung Bioman toys na sinasabi ko kanina, the Chogokin line, and we had plastic model kits. Naka-release yung 4-inch toys in clamshell packages, parang mga kiddie watches, parang ganun yung style ng packaging niya. And it was big kasi even if we didn't have the shows Changeman and Flashman, I remember seeing the Chogokin line here. So parang nag-continue lang sila nun. And also, we had plastic model kits, which is basically the Sentai Mini-Pla. Mini-Pla meaning mini plastic model kits. We had those that, dalawang set siya. One, you could put together 5 Zords, so you can build a Megazord. And there were other Zords na buong Megazord na, tas you get a Titanus, which is the carrier Zord. Isasakay mo sa Titanus, and then you have your Ultra Zord. It was pretty cool. Tapos, ang naisip ni Haim Saban and people at Saban Entertainment, and Shoki Levy, of course, was to keep the iconography of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers going. So, in Japan kasi, every year, nagpapalit. Ang ginawa ng Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they kept the look of the superheroes, which is the Rangers. Ang bago lang was the weapons, the Zords, the villains, pero retained yung itsura ng mga superheroes mismo, which were the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which was a good move kasi for 3 years, nangingibabaw sila sa ratings. So, very iconic. And when they started to switch out, that's when nagdwindle yung sale. So, kumita ng malaki because of it ang Bandai and Fox eventually bought Saban. So, Power Rangers used footage from Z-Ranger in Season 1. So, dyan natin nakuha yung Megazord, kalaban natin si Rita Repulsa, tapos mga dinosaurs ang theme. Tapos, in the second season, while ganun pa rin, same pa rin yung itsura ng mga Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they got new Zords, which were the Thunder Zords. Sa story, para mag-continue, the Dinozords morphed into the Thunder Zords. So basically, it's still the Dinozords, it's just morphed, so it's continuing that theme. But at the same time, they got new weapons, they got new villains, which is Lord Zed, na nakakatakot, oh my gosh. To the point na they had to dial him down kasi medyo nakakatakot siya for kids. And in the third season, they used Kako Ranger naman, which was ninja-themed in Japan, but they didn't use the Rangers agad. Nag-guest star sila eventually into a mini-series. But they used the Zords from there. So, Ninja Zords, Shogun Zords, and a new villain, which was Rita Repulsa's dad, Master Vile. Also, sobrang big na ng Power Rangers, so Fox was like, tara, gawa tayo ng movie. So they made a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, even actually before mag-air yung season 3, and it's to this day one of the best superhero movies ever, one of the most iconic cult classics in terms of superhero movies. They had it was really Power Rangers, but from a very Western perspective. Halo-halo na siya. Suits from Zyuranger and Dairanger, Zords from Kaku Ranger, mishmashed in a very Hollywood style aesthetic with rock orchestra. Until now, very iconic pa rin yung Go Go Power Rangers! Go Go Power Rangers! The rock version for the movie, my music yung Red Hot Chili Peppers and uh-oh. But there were no movie toys, really. Because remember, kinukuha lang ng Bandai America sa Japan lahat ng toys. So, what did they do? They repackaged everything. So, meron na tayo mga metallic version ng mga figures or reboxed version ng mga Japanese release. Instead of the usual green packaging, it's now this black and silver packaging na sobrang premium hanggang ngayon. Really, one of the best kinds of packaging that I've ever seen in a 90s toy line. So after nung 3 seasons ng Power Rangers in the States, sa band started to wonder kung mag-work ba yung formula ng Super Sentai in Japan, where every year papalit ng cast, every year papalit ng theme. Essentially, it's a new show. So sabi niya, sige, let's try that. Pero nilagyan niya pa rin ng konting continuity wherein nag-continue yung story from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to now Power Rangers Zeo. In the Philippines, it was aired as Zeo Ranger, pero lumipat siya from ABS-CBN to the sister channel, which is Studio 23, which was just starting at the time, if I'm not mistaken. Feeling ko yun yung reason kung bakit medyo humina yung Power Rangers in the Philippines, because Studio 23 at the time was not as accessible as ABS-CBN. ABS-CBN, you can pretty much view it from any TV that you had. Ang Studio 23 medyo hindi lahat ng TV kaya mag-tune in to Studio 23 at the time. And even if lumabas yung Turbo, a Power Rangers movie na medyo kasabay ng Zeo Rangers here in the Philippines, medyo hindi na ganun ka-powerful yung reach ng Power Rangers. So what happened? After Zeo Rangers, Power Rangers in the Philippines was largely abandoned. So we skipped 4 seasons kasi iniisip nga ng Channel 2 and likely other local channels na hindi naman bebenta. And in fact, they had kind of some reason to believe it if they were looking at how it was in the United States. So in the States, medyo hit and miss yung mga sumunod na seasons. So after nung Turbo, it was Power Rangers in Space. It aired in the US. Medyo mabenta pa siya because it had that whole space vibe. And nakakatawa kasi in Japan, it's not a space thing. It's a game thing. So, medyo lost in translation. Pero sure, you know, unique treatment. Tapos, dun na nag-umpisa yung mga maskulado na Power Rangers figures. And it was based on the understanding, the Western understanding, na pag heroic yung superheroes, dapat muscular and kitang-kita mo in their body. So you could see it even translate to the TV show. So what they did was they introduced the concept of the Battleizer. And when the Red Ranger got the Battleizer, malaki katawan niya. Okay. So after nun, dire-diretso na. Lahat na ng Power Rangers lines halos, muscular na yung figures. Pero sa figures lang siya. Dun sa TV show, dinrap na nila yon. That was unique to In Space. Nag-start na rin ng iconic black and gold Megazords sa Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, which you'll see here and there down the line in later years na pagka-premium variant, black and gold kailangan. Now, Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, which is hindi rin pinalabas dito, were mostly rescue vehicles and train themed. Now, medyo maganda naman yung show. And actually, medyo acclaimed siya sa mga fans. Nagustuhan nila. Pero dahil trains and cars, medyo humina yung sales. Kasi it's nothing that fantastical. Hindi siya animals, hindi siya dinosaurs, hindi siya dragons. So, little boys and girls were like, okay lang. So, I think maybe that also kind of fed into ABS-CBN and other local channels just going, probably not. We're not gonna get that. Yung sumunod, Power Rangers Time Force, isa sa mga pinaka-favorite ng madaming fans. Pero hindi pa rin pinalabas sa Pilipinas. Dito in-introduce yung Megazord na pwedeng mag-convert into another Megazord mode kahit same components, it's just that you switch it around and it becomes a whole other Megazord. So, gaya nga nasabi ko, every year in the United States, medyo hit and miss ang Power Rangers. Pero dahil every year nga, nagpapalit sila ng theme, pwede silang mag-refresh. Pag hindi pumatok yung series, edi huwag mag-alala kasi next year mapapalitan naman. Diyan pinanganak yung concept ng Power Rangers is evergreen and constantly changing every year. Now, finally, binili ng Disney ang Power Rangers. And ABS-CBN was like, ay, Disney ba yan? O, sige, tara, bilhin natin. I'm not sure what really happened, pero it looks like that's what happened. In fact, it was tagalized in ABS-CBN. Hindi na siya Studio 23. Pero I think pinalabas din siya sa Studio 23 if I'm not mistaken. Yung toys bumalik din in the Philippines. So yung mga fans ng Power Rangers na mga 5 years nang walang nakikitang product, medyo na-surprise. Kasi bakit ang lalaki ng katawan ng mga figures, no? Ano nangyari? So sa Wild Force din nagsimula yung medyo umuulan ng Zords. As in, sobrang dami. Sa mythology ng mismong show, in fact, madami talaga. Like there's 100 power animals or wild Zords. Pero hindi naman lahat ng yon ginawa ng toys. Though yung iba, available in Japan through Super Sentai as exclusive. Sadly, di lahat ng wild Zords na ginawa ay pinakita sa show. Hindi rin lahat ng pinakita sa show ay ginawa ng toy. Dito rin nag-start ng Sentai Hero na vinyl statues ng figures, which were medyo accurate body type, pero hindi talaga siya like action figures. Kasi the thing is, Japan had constantly been releasing these tiny vinyl figures. Ang ginawa nila, medyo scale up nila, tapos ginandahan nila yung tindig ng katawan. So, pag dinisplay mo, mukha talagang tao. Little, statuettes. Which would continue down the line as well. It's important to note na na 1 year and a half pa rin tayo, gaya ng dati. So, kung ano yung Sentai sa Japan, ipapalabas sa Power Rangers the following year. And then, next year after that, or a year and a half later, makukuha natin in the Philippines. Power Rangers Ninja Storm and Power Rangers Dino Thunder followed after that. Tapos we got whatever figures were released na nilabas ng USA. And again, mostly what happened was the figures were still US based, so muscular figures, very heroic stances, action features, mahilig ang Western audiences sa action features, but the Zords and the roleplay items were directly still from Japan. So anything, any Morphers, any Megazords were still made from the mold in Japan. So by the time Power Rangers SPD rolled around, at this point, Bandai Asia, yung humahawak ng license sa Philippines and anywhere in Asia outside Japan, decided to double down and went, you know what? Okay, so hindi naman lahat nire-release ng Power Rangers, no? Bakit hindi na lang natin kunin sa Japan yung mga hindi nire-release ng Power Rangers? Tapos pagsamasamahin natin lahat. And basically, pag nasa Pilipinas ka or select parts of Asia, you would be so lucky as a collector because you got Power Rangers merchandise and Super Sentai merchandise. Even in Power Rangers SPD, kung medyo namamahalan ka sa mga Megazords na isang box, pwede kang bumili ng tingi, literally. Tapos, yung mga tingi-tingi na yon, meron pang special variants. In fact, in my case, bumili ako ng tingi-tingi na Delta Megazord, and what happened was the yellow part is silver. So special yun, nakakatawa. Also, yung mga Zords and toys na hindi minamarket ng Power Rangers dito, nirelease kagaya ng Delta Base, which was a huge playset that housed 5 Zords and turned into a Megazord on its own. Sobrang laki. Like, in the next series, Power Rangers Mystic Force, we started having swappable civilian heads naman, which is a nod to the old automorphin gimmick. Pero hindi na siya yung clunky, bulky figures. This time, you just swap out the heads and you can get human faces then. Here in the Philippines, kompleto lahat ng lineup, lahat na nirelease sa US halos nandito. And anything na hindi sinama ng Power Rangers, like for example, the Gold Ranger or the Evil Megazord, nilabas ng Bandai Asia. So, swerte ng Pilipino. Also, around this time, dito na nag-start yung nagre-release ng Sentai Hero figures, which was the 6-inch figures set, 6 to 7-inch figure set na sinasabi ko earlier. Nirelease na yan starting Mystic Force onwards, meron na tayo sa Pilipinas. So, you could collect all of these vinyl figures as well. Pagdating ng Operation Overdrive,
The Power Ranger Operation Overdrive Drive Max vehicles. 5 dynamic Power Ranger vehicles that morph into a tough, all-terrain Megatron. Then morph again to become the most powerful Megazord of all time. The awesome deluxe Drive Max Megazord. Evil can run, but it can't hide.
Bandai America started, well, actually lahat naman ng toy companies started thinking of making things more cost-effective. In Bandai Japan, what they did was they made the Zords smaller. So, hindi na siya, medyo may standard size kasi ang mga Megazords. Although hindi sobrang pareho. Roughly may pare-parehas na scale. Ang ginawa ng Bandai Japan is nilitan nila yung Zords nila. Sa United States naman, instead of litan yung Zords, ang ginawa nila is same size, malaki pa din, pero mas hollow, mas bawas yung engineering. Essentially, hindi fans ang mga tao nung mga Zords na lumabas. Tsaka yung mga roleplay items, medyo kiddie size na siya para makatipid sa plastic pero at the same time keeping it reachable. Medyo head scratcher kasi yung budget na napunta sa pagbawas ng engineering dun sa mga Megazords napunta into making other Megazords na hindi naman accurate to the show or anybody would care about. Like literally, if I try to show you this Megazord right here, naalala nyo ba yan? Nobody remembers that. Nobody cares about that. But the idea there is yung isang box ng Megazord mura pare. I mean, hindi man mura pero accessible pare. Kasi what they're thinking is if they kept the same amount of engineering with the die cast and everything, magmamahal na siya. Now, tinry nung next season na bumawi kahit paano with at least the figures.
Fury figures. Slam them to activate their awesome shock sensor battle sound and rock evil to the core.
Ito na yung pinakamagandang figures ng Bandai America at the time na kahit basic figures, medyo maganda yung articulation and panalo yung sculpt. Sinabayan pa to ng first wave of super legend figures that were in scale with the Jungle Fury figures, which included the popular 6 Rangers. So, Green, White, Gold Ranger, and finally, a great figure of Lord Zed. In the Philippines and in parts of Asia, dito na rin nag-start mag-promote yung Bandai Asia na i-promote yung toys and the show simultaneously with mall tours where kids and fans could meet whatever Power Rangers were coming out in that year. So Jungle Fury nag-start and then sunod-sunod na Overdrive, RPM, lahat. You could meet Rangers. Whatever was gonna be airing next, you would meet them in person. And I was always there, all the time. After some time, nag-decide ang Disney na hindi na nila ma-handle ang Power Ranger. Now, Disney is obviously a financial juggernaut, right? Pero, hindi pasok sa Federal Commission on Communication guidelines for kids. Never siya naging pasok talaga. Even though it was long-running, nahihirapan pa rin yung Disney to sell it to networks. And at the time, kung ikukumpara nila, Disney Princess was in its heyday. So yun yung profitable. And pag ikukumpara mo yun sa Power Rangers, medyo nababano yung presentation and sales and everything ng Power Rangers. So they decided to eventually cut ties. They started considering it a flop. So the final season of Power Rangers in Disney was RPM. Nalaman ng creative team na RPM was gonna be the last season, medyo ginanda nila yung story. As in, there were a lot of observations about the previous seasons. Medyo it's a little bit kiddified. Ang ginawa ng RPM was they used like one apocalyptic story arc for the entire show, which was a first for the Power Rangers franchise. And it was one of the best seasons ever. Now, as a final goodbye, hindi na shinow ng Disney yung Shinkenger, which was supposed to be the next series after RPM. Ang ginawa na lang nila is, nirelease nila ulit yung Mighty Morphin with cartoonified effects. So, Mighty Morphin pa rin siya, pero parang may comic book style effects na hindi ko siya ma-explain. Tingnan nyo na lang.
After 10,000 years!
And, of course, in line with this, they started to sell MMPR product. Now, here's a funny thing. Hindi natin natanggap to sa Pilipinas, guys. never came out, which is sobrang sad. Because medyo they scaled down the figures, naging 3-inch na lang siya, medyo closer to G.I. Joe size. Dito na nag-umpisa yung mag-boom ulit yung MMPR. And I think medyo na-surprise din yung Bandai America because, I mean, they should have realized, right? Bumenta siya really. And this was where we finally got our new reversion Megazord, all plastic still, but it allowed combining with the vehicles, which never happened before. Dati kasi, pag Zords lang, vehicles lang. This time, you can combine your vehicles with your Megazord, which was unique. Babalikan natin yan later, but after this, Disney sold Power Rangers back to the only guy who wanted it, which was Haim Saban. Now, binili ulit ng Saban ang Power Rangers, and they started using the same concepts from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. From the marketing, to the theme song, from the way everything was handled way back in Mighty Morphin. Ultimo yung comedic duo aspect, binalik nila. For Samurai, Saban made all new US only or Power Rangers only modes to increase toy sales in Mega Mode and Super Mega Mode, which I love. Not a lot of people were fans of that kasi ginamit lang siya sa cockpit footage. Sa Megazord lang siya ginamit. But I love those suits. I love them so much. Almost every Ranger had between 2 to 6 modes to collect. They continued the scale from the last Mighty Morphin line to the point na they even included Rita Repulsa finally getting her own figure in the main line. Yay! Kasi muntik na magkaroon ng Rita Repulsa. It's just that na-cancel siya. Hindi siya nagawa after the prototype stage. 20 years din yun. So what Bandai America did was, diba sabi ko nga, the Megazords could now combine with the vehicle. Sabi nila, why not? Let's make the new Megazords combinable with the old Megazords. So they started making what's called the Zord Builder system. So new Mighty Morphin, Samurai, Dino Charge, Megaforce, Super Megaforce, Ninja Steel, Super Dino Charge, Super Ninja Steel, Megazords were all cross-compatible. It was nuts. Walang ganyan sa Japan. You couldn't mix and match your Sentai robots. Pero in Power Rangers now, kung gusto mo ilagay yung arms from the Ninja Steel Megazord and ilagay mo sa Super Mega Force body tapos yung leg is Mighty Morphin, you can totally do that. No problem. While in Samurai, tinry din nila ibalik yung Automorphin gimmick. Pero dahil hindi nila kamukha yung actors, in fact, nakamask lang. And puro lalaki yung Rangers. And medyo hindi siya the same aesthetic. Hindi siya pumatok. So, hindi na nila inulit. Sa Japan naman, in Super Sentai, SH figure arts were starting to be made. Now, una as full teams of Samurai, Super Megaforce, and papatak-patak na other Rangers. And eventually, gumawa rin sila ng Mighty Morphin na nirelease in Mighty Morphin boxes as well. Even nagkaroon ng male na Yellow Ranger tsaka female na Yellow Ranger. Kasi sa Japanese footage, lalaki siya. Sa US footage, babae siya. Meron tong more than 30 points of articulation. It's fully painted, complete with fully painted accessories then. Though medyo manipis yung base figure, medyo payat pa siya. Because yung mastery talaga ng figure arts is more Kamen Rider, which is armored figures. Unfortunately, makikita natin na mas malakas talaga in the US and internationally versus sa Japan yung appeal. Hindi na tinuloy yung SH figure arts. Pero in the US, everybody was still, no, make more. But they never did. Ang nangyari na lang is SH figure arts started to focus on Kamen Rider, Ultraman, and eventually Avengers and Justice League, among other franchises. Around this time, Saban also started making premium Megazords and weapons. It's called the Legacy line. Una ni-release nila ulit yung Megazord na pinush ni Disney nung palabas na sila, but this time die-cast, called the Legacy Megazord. And, well, die-cast, great, okay, pero hindi pa siya super awesome. Pero yung mga sumunod, Dragon Zord, Titanus, Ninja Megazord, Thunder Megazord, Falcon Zord, Tiger Zord, all of those were amazing. They were fully painted, they were die-cast in the proper places, and they were amazingly done. As in, premium talaga. Pero medyo premium din yung presyo, of course. Now, they would also start re-releasing, di ba sabi ko earlier, na down the line, there were black and gold premium variants as well. And eventually, they started releasing literally gold releases of the Megazords and the actual props and the weapons. Nag-release din sila ng figures in the Legacy Collection, starting with Mighty Morphin. So this was a new scale. Well, actually, it's in line with the old scale, which is 5-inch. Pero maganda yung, medyo mas maganda yung mga sculpt, pero basic figures. Mighty Morphin muna, tapos Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. These were our first actual Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie figures, and they look awesome. I still have my set. After this, in-apply nila yung design from that line, and they called it Action Hero. In-apply nila sa basic line nila. Super Mega Force, Dino Charge, Ninja Steel, all of those had those Action Hero figure lines. And nakakatawa because you could collect all the Red Rangers at the time and most of the 6th Rangers. Tapos the Super Mega Force team, the Power Rangers 2017 movie team, and they started calling that Action Hero. So yung Legacy Collection naman ngayon was now used for a new line, which is 7-inch figures pantapat sa DC Universe Classics, Star Wars Black Series, Marvel Legends. So these were 7-inch figures na highly articulated, if a bit medyo muscular pa din yung mga men, and medyo very idealized yung female figures. Now, dahil may local releases pa din tayo ng Sentai here in the Philippines, for the toys at least, if di mo trip yung mga Zord Builder cross-compatible Zords, halos lahat ng Zords galing Japan were still available locally. Literally, pumunta ka ng Toy Town, pumunta ka ng Toy Kingdom, makikita mo siya doon. They were still available alongside the main line. Minsan, nauuna pa sa Power Rangers adaptation. For that very reason, nung lumabas yung Gokaiger sa Japan, which is the anniversary series featuring all of the previous Rangers in Japan, nilabas ng Bandai Asia lahat ng pwede nilang ilabas, including the iconic Ranger keys. So, maswerte tayo in the Philippines and in Bandai Asia territories because in the US, when they started releasing those, kiddified na naman siya. And not the right size morpher. But we got everything that looked exactly like the props in the show. In Dino Charge naman, tinry na naman ni Power Rangers na ibalik yung dating playability with the multiple monsters na pwede mong i-collect alongside the Action Hero 5-inch scale. Di siya sinakyan ng Banki though. Hindi tayo nagkaroon nun in the Philippines. Very, very sad. Also, weirdly, hindi rin tayo nagkaroon ng White Ninja Steel Ranger here in the Philippines. I thought I should mention that because she's the only mainline Ranger that we never got in the Philippines. Ang nakakatawa niya, nag-release pa ng multi-pack of Ranger figures kasi hindi rin talaga siya kasama, which was very strange. And for kids, though hindi natin naramdaman here in the Philippines kasi hindi siya nilabas dito, there was a line of Fisher-Price Power Rangers in Imaginext style that was done in various Ranger modes, villains, monsters, playsets, everything basically that you would have wanted sana sa main line. Pero dun niya nilagay sa kids collectible line na hindi ni-release sa Philippines. So minsan pag pumunta ka sa mga toy conventions, may makikita ka mga ganun. In the end, the Legacy line continued to have some wearable helmets, display helmets na smaller, Morphers, Legacy Zords, even the Communicator, Blade Blaster, tapos re-releases ng mga classic Automorphin figures. Nung medyo naubusan na sila ng idea, they started to release Legacy Zords na hindi naman nagko-combine. I'm not really sure kung bakit. Now, after sa Bandai's contract was up, di na nila tinuloy. Di masyado pinoblicize why, but Hasbro came in and was announced na sa kanila na yung toy rights. But a few days later, in-announce na hindi lang po toy rights. They actually bought the entire thing. So, katabi na ng Marvel, Star Wars, My Little Pony, Transformers, Power Rangers is now with Hasbro. And Hasbro pretty much tried to retain most of the business model with a few changes. So, two-prong ang attack ng Hasbro with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers leading the collector line and the current show leading the basic line for kids. Hasbro also applied their Marvel Legends and Star Wars approach to Power Rangers, creating a line of 6-inch figures with civilian heads called the Lightning Collections. As in, literally, merong civilian heads na pwede mong ipalit-palit. Hasbro on the surface seems to be taking most of the fan and buyer requests to heart. So, gusto mo ng toys na pwedeng ibato-bato ng anak mo at hindi masisira? Meron. Gusto mo ng smaller collectibles na parang Imaginext na collectible in blind bags or, you know, for your kids na gusto mag-start mag-collect? Meron. Gusto mo ng medyo mura pero pasok naman sa engineering na Megazords? Meron. Gusto mo ng helmets and props? Meron. Ang wala lang talaga is the premium Megazords na ginawa ng Bandai. Parang hindi pa gaano magawa ng Hasbro for some reason. Iba-iba yung mga tinatry nilang approach, pero hindi pa natin nakikita yung premium feel talaga ng Legacy Zord. Yun na lang yung wala silang katapat. And they even announced that they're re-releasing, well, not re-releasing because they're putting out new Automorphin figures that look kind of like the classic Automorphin figures with a twist. Literally, pwede mo i-twist yung arm, pwede mo i-twist yung leg, so it's the same basic build pero with a little more articulation na pwede mo itabi dun sa classic figures mo. And also, pindot ka na lang ng pindot, hindi mo na siya kailangan i-reload. Kakabili lang ng Power Rangers a few years ago, and now may nagbabadyang balita na baka mag-iba ang formula ng Power Rangers after the next show, which is Dino Fury.
In the tradition of dinosaur teams of the past comes a brand new entry. Power Rangers Dino Fury.
Pero one thing that is for certain, for 26 plus years and 900 plus episodes, hindi pa rin nawawala ang Power Rangers dahil sa fan base nito, kids and collectors alike. Do you think it's gonna disappear anytime soon? I don't think so. Anyway, this has been X-Paco of Ranger Wiki. Sa totoo lang, hindi pa to complete history because napakadami talagang aspeto ng Power Rangers and Power Rangers toys na pwede natin pag-usapan. But visit us at powerrangers.fandom.com, which is the official section of the Power Rangers at Wikia in fandom, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Ranger Wiki. Also, sali na kayo sa Power Rangers and Super Sentai Collectors Philippines, which is the first and only full-fledged Facebook group dedicated to collectors of Power Rangers and Super Sentai. This has been X-Paco again, now signing off. Peace out!